Good day and welcome to another episode of It's a Long Road, the Ramble Series podcast. I'm your host, Ryan, and I'm very excited today. I think this is only my second official interview on this podcast channel of the Ramble franchise, my first one being with author David Morrell. I have with me fellow author Nat Segaloff. Nat, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure to be here so far, Ryan. A little bit goofy today.
That's fine. Yeah, so far, if anytime you want to bow out, that's fine. I will release what we've said. We'll get as far as we get. No, it's a real pleasure to have you on. And boy, I'm excited to get into this. I have 1,000 questions. I'll try to be concise. I'll try not to geek out because I'm just curious, Nat, first off, how did you get into the business of writing these books on franchises like The Exorcist, of course, Rambo, which we're going to talk about, Scarface? How is it you're doing this? How do you do it?
I fell into it. I was writing books as anybody would who wants to be an author. I began as a journalist, and so the nonfiction books that I do are an extension of what I was doing for newspapers and radio and TV, only, of course, longer. It turns out that the publishers in America, at least when I started, have a kind of an affinity for round numbers, not when they pay you, but when it comes to anniversaries. The 50th anniversary of The Exorcist, the 40th anniversary of Scarface, and in this case, the 40th anniversary of First Blood Part 2, Rambo, or Rambo First Blood Part 2. That was part of the incentive, but also I have a very good agent named Lee Sobel, and he's able to speak to the publishers and find out what they're looking for, and every now and then it works out. So I half fell into it, and have redesigned myself to meet the current market.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I was going to say you do have an extensive history of work. So journalism, and I was going to say journalism, that has to be, because when I read your book, I was like, how in the world did you get this information? It seems to me you must have rattled some cages in your deep dive into books. It's just a combination that a journalist would have to do. Like, this isn't just something somebody can, how should I say this? I don't think you can make your Rambo book just by scrolling on the internet.
It's homework, but don't forget, I had a rabbi in the thing. I had David Morrell, whom I've known for several years. We were connected by screenwriter and television writer Sterling Sullivan. So, I did start at the top of the food chain when it comes to Ramboiana, whatever the word is. But also the rest of it is just digging. It's what a journalist does. Like a policeman on a stakeout, you just start looking at stuff, and pretty soon the pieces come together. I look at it as though you've got a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, but there's no picture on the front to tell you what it's supposed to be. So you keep trying everything until something starts to make sense. And so far, it's been making sense.
Oh, I love that. I love that analogy. You don't have the picture in the front. Do you like the Rambo films? I read your book, and Rambo lovers will like the book, if that makes sense. But do you genuinely like the films, or were you in this just to make the report?
I like the first one, First Blood, 1982. Because it very closely resembles David's book, First Blood, which was published in 1972. The other films, I was agnostic about them. I didn't even see all of them before I started writing the book. And like a lot of people, I came to Rambo first with First Blood, and then with the second and the third ones, I said, this is Rambo? But I started to understand them. And when you start to understand something, you begin to empathize, and you begin to see what the producers were doing and what the actors and writers were doing. And so I came to have a lot of respect for them. Although affection might be kind of a risky word when it comes to some of the moments in some of the films.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate your honest answer. It's just because, as you can imagine, Nat, the people listening to this podcast are Rambo fanatics. Not that you have to cater to them. We've heard our fair share of criticism, and we give our criticism to the films. I suspect probably some of the same criticisms you have, maybe as just as a film goer or film lover, we have with these films as well. But overall, we love the Rambo character portrayed by Stallone. We enjoy the action, the thrills. We can take off the thinking cap of some of the scenes, and the films overall just bring us joy. But you're right. Of course, First Blood, the first film, it's actually just a really good drama that happens to have action beats within it.
That's true. And I think Stallone gets a really bad rap when it comes to acting. His performance in First Blood is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And the more you watch it, in fact, even if you watch it with the sound off, he's conveying things with his emotions, with his eyes, and just with his body stature. The man is a much better actor than he's given credit for, and that he's been allowed to by some of the films he's been in since he became an action franchise. My difficulty with some of the films is mostly on a technical basis, how they're edited or how some of the shooting is done. Philosophically, I think there's lots we can write about it. And when I wrote the Rambo Report, I didn't want to castigate anything or anybody. Let's get it right up front here. The films have been criticized for jingoism and racism. I think those are things that you can draw from them, but I don't think that's why they made the films. And I think if you look them in a more constructive way, you will see that is not what they are. It's in the nature of the kind of films, action war movies. They're going to be jingoistic. That's what a war movie is. Look at anything the studios made during World War II, and you'd have to have a trigger warning on every single last one of them. We're talking about a genre of film which has to be accepted more broadly, and I think invested in more emotionally.
Awesome. Now we're going to get to more of the book. I've got a couple things from each movie I want to ask you about without, how should I say this? I want people to read the book, right? And I don't want to speak to some of the things that I found interesting. Some things people might already know about. I will say your book is chock full of things I had no idea about that I found fascinating. I've been a fan for 40 plus years myself. So I was reading things like, that's what I mean. How did you get this information? It was amazing. Some of the stones you uncovered. You've done about 30 books. Is that right? In one way or another?
Lost count. And I'm not being coy. I really have lost count.
That's fair. That's fair. Did you do a biography on John Belushi?
Yes and no. I did the A&E biography for television on John Belushi. I didn't write the book. That was, of course, done by Bob Woodward as Wired. And then Judy Jacqueline Belushi, his widow, who we lost a few years ago, did a book called Samurai Widow, which is wonderful, and I helped her on that.
Now, regarding Bob Woodward, do you have any overall feelings on him? Do you have any thoughts of him as a biographer?
I think he's a terrific journalist. I'll go with what Judy told me about Wired. Judy said it was not false about John, but it stressed the bad stuff and didn't talk about the good stuff.
Okay.
And that's why she wrote Samurai Widow. I never met John Belushi, but I had unique access because Judy had taped a lot of interviews with the people in John's life while the memories were still fresh. Some of those appeared on an MTV special. I was able to get use of all of them through Judy and her then husband, Victor Bizzano, who was an old college friend who brought us all together, and was able to use that and make the only really positive show about Belushi that only quickly mentions the shitty last part.
Because you might have heard when Bill Murray was on Joe Rogan that he slammed Bob Woodward's book. He said that he found it completely inaccurate, cruel, and criminal. Murray said he read only 5 pages of the book and was so appalled by its portrayal of Belushi that he refused to read more, stating, quote, "You'd have to hold me down and burn my feet to make me read more of it." He criticized Woodward for relying on sources so far outside the inner circle and suggested the book's negative depiction made him question Woodward's credibility, even joking, "Oh my God, they framed Nixon." So he was friends with John. So that's why I was curious what your thoughts were on that regard. And that's, I think, what you're talking about is, I think Bill, being, of course, a close and personal friend of John, maybe did not like what he felt was cruel and inaccurate portrayal of John.
People are in the public eye, especially someone like Bill Murray, who's a magnet for interest, even though he tries to be very private, are always going to be slammed with lies, innuendos, provocative statements. It's a terrible thing. It's something that Billy Wilder and Charlie Brackett wrote about in the movie Sunset Boulevard, where they were talking about Norman Desmond, the movie star. They said a dozen press agents working overtime can do terrible things to the human spirit. And when you're famous, just thank God you're not famous. The two comments that I got about John Belushi, one was from Mark Metcalf, who played Niedermeyer in Animal House. And the other was from Jimmy Belushi, John's kid brother. One of them said it was an accident waiting to happen. And the other referred to John's overdose as an industrial accident. That was done with great love and great feeling and great irony. I didn't know John Belushi. I knew a lot of the people in his life. All I can say is it's a damn shame. But what they do to you just to get more from you is beyond obscene.
Yeah. Thank you for entertaining me on that. I just saw that you worked on a biography and it triggered my memory of that interview. Now, you also wrote the book, The Exorcist Legacy. And I will tell you, Nat, I to this day still have not seen that film. It scares me to death. And I love horror films like Friday the 13th, Halloween, I guess slasher flicks. I have a hard time with possession films and possession scenes in TV and movies. What are your feelings on The Exorcist overall? I'm just curious. I'm geeking out here a little bit. Excuse me, folks. I know this is a Ramble podcast, but I'm also a bit of a film buff myself, or nerd, I should say. So how do you make peace with The Exorcist films?
Let me ask you a question first. Were you raised in the church?
I was raised in a religious upbringing, but not a Catholic upbringing.
Okay. There's something that can be said about people who are raised with a certain level of faith, and that is that the unknown seems to affect them more than people who are raised with, as I was, a more scientific and analytical background. I don't know what happens. I'm not saying anything. It's just the idea of possession, especially as beautifully documented in the movie The Exorcist, and as chillingly and seductively written in Bill Blatty's book, makes it sound very, very real. They hit all the bases in trying to make you understand what happened. And the fact that it was based on a supposed actual case makes it even more realistic and more visceral. There are people who to this day will not see The Exorcist, and I certainly understand that. It's not what the film is as much as what it conjures in people's dark insides and how they've been raised over the years.
I'm not religious anymore. I don't subscribe to a faith. I'm agnostic, atheist, whatever. I don't know anything anymore. Put it that way. I just try to be a good person in general, but I don't subscribe to any religious philosophy. But still, I guess maybe that's the upbringing in me. I remember having a hard time seeing, even on Saturday Night Live, I was a big Saturday Night Live watcher. Anytime they would have a Jesus character being portrayed in Saturday Night Live, and I would say offended is the right word, but I felt uncomfortable at the time seeing the Jesus figure being used in the comedy styling, whereas now I wouldn't, but that was my upbringing. So The Exorcist to this day, there's still a part of me. Am I going to invite an evil spirit to my home if I watch this?
But if it makes you feel any better, the actual possession was probably a fraud.
Oh, there you go.
That's in the book.
You did the study of this book, so I got to ask you: wasn't the film set itself cursed, or is that just an urban legend? Didn't people die? Wasn't there like story? This is what I mean. I feel like you don't hear these stories. When I read the Ramble Report, Credit wasn't possessed, Dennehy wasn't possessed. So what's going on? The Exorcist said, is that all urban legend?
The programmed answer is the film took 2 years to make. If you take 200 people over the course of 2 years, statistically, something is going to happen to someone along those lines. It's easy and publicity worthy to say that The Exorcist had the whammy on it. But in fact, a lot of stuff happens to a lot of people all the time. And over the course of 2 years, something can happen, and some things did. A lot of people thought the vibes were very bad on it. Ellen Burstyn, who's a very spiritual woman and a lovely, lovely lady and a great actress, believes that the vibes were very bad on that film and that certain things happened, certain things she can't explain. I've known William Friedkin for as long as the film has been around, and he pulled some stunts, but nothing that would hurt anybody. Things happen. That's all I can say.
All right. What was the famous scene about the possession? Wasn't someone like tossed around? What was that scene again?
There was a scene where Linda Blair was in a strap device and pushed her back and forth in the bed. And it was a physical device that Marcel Vercoter, the designer of these effects, was in charge of. And she was being whipped back and forth. But the straps were holding her in, let go. And so what happened was, like a fly swatter, it kept on hitting her as she was going up and down. And so the screams, "Mother, make it stop," were real. And they only didn't do it 20 times till it worked out. No, but they were real. And I think Linda Blair has talked about that.
Okay, and speaking of real pain on the set, see, folks, it all ties back in. Ramble, First Blood. When Sly hit that tree, here's the myth, and this was in your book. 3 different stuntmen. I feel like the middle stuntman's never named, and you didn't name him in the book. You named the first individual, and then you said 3 guys did the stunt. The one guy, I forget his name, very famous stunt
Buddy
guy.
Joe Hooker was one of the guys who did
That's right. Then you didn't name the second man, and then Sly, of course, did the last part of the fall into the tree. Do we not know the name of the second guy, or
I couldn't specify. IMDb, which can be our friend where they're not being inaccurate, does list the stunt performers.
Okay.
But I have been unable to get really detailed files about the stunt performance on this. But yes, Stallone did hurt himself as he was dropped down because his ribs hit some of the branches that were sticking out. Not the only time it happened either. He really took a couple of wallops on that picture.
This is just me as a fan of Sly. So I'm just picking a brain of yours who's a journalist and you've done your research. And one of the stories that in your book, you mentioned that Sly tells his story about why he was unable to be drafted into the Vietnam War at the time because he was of age. He could have been drafted for the Vietnam conflict. He was in a European country, apparently going to school, either dramatic acting or otherwise. But he said that he received an ear injury at a concert. And he also said, in typical Sly fashion, which I don't know sometimes about him, that he was asleep in a sound speaker or something like that. Now, there has been some, how should I say it? People have accused him of being a draft dodger. There's other rumors that maybe his face paralysis might have prevented him from being, and maybe he doesn't even like to say that. So he made up the hearing issue story. What are you? You don't have to answer. I don't want to put you on the hook here. Where is the truth in all this? What do you think it is?
I didn't speak with him. Not that I didn't try, but his agents gave me different reasons for why he wasn't available, quote unquote, to me.
Sure.
I don't think those two explanations that I have in the book are irreconcilable. One of them is that he was in Switzerland teaching at a girls' school.
That's right.
And he was simply on a 2S deferment, which would happen if he was draft eligible at that point. The second one, where he had hearing damage because he fell asleep at a rock concert. And apparently he was pretty high and he passed out near the speaker. I don't think he had his head actually in the speaker, but if it was a rock concert, he was probably proximate to it and it could have damaged his hearing. But he hasn't talked about hearing loss in the years since then. I think what happens is that Sylvester Stallone is a very garrulous man, a terrific interview, I am told. Once you get him started, it's hard to get him to stop. And he's very colorful and very entertaining. And I think he believes in telling stories.
I agree.
He did have some criticism from some other celebrities when he was held accountable for not being in the draft. But there's so many other celebrities, including people who get elected to office, who avoided the draft. I'm not going to make a big point about any of this.
No, fair enough. No, you're absolutely correct. I love Sly. We're all humans at the end of the day. Like you said, that comes with the price of fame. Our life is scrutinized a little bit more. It's a good thing I'm not famous. I'm not a perfect human. I just find it fascinating with Sly. I feel like at times he does spin a fun tale about things. I think there's a little bit of truth, but there's also, I think by naturally, he is a storyteller.
Yeah. He's an entertainer and a damn good one. He delivers the goods.
Yes.
We're not talking about curing cancer here, okay?
No.
We're talking about a movie.
That's just it. We should hold on to. He's not making any other claims other than just being an actor. I know. And sometimes not we as in me, but sometimes the public can be very brutal with celebrities in that we're trying to make them better than we are. And that's what I don't try to do that, meaning he without sin cast the first stone. We're all just frail, dumb humans. Some of our mistakes just happen to be publicized or on TV, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the problem. Imagine if everything you did when you were 13 years old was all over the internet. I don't know what kids do now if they get a boner in the 7th grade.
I'm so glad I didn't have my smartphone back then. I would not have been smart with the smartphone when I was a teenager. Now, I got a question for you. We're going to get into some of the film stuff. Well, we talked about already with the injury with the first film, but I got to ask before I forget. I also do a Rocky podcast. Are you going to do a Rocky report? Fans want to know.
A lot of people have tried to do a book on Rocky. It's been hard for other people to sell. And there's also a dispute going on between Sylvester Stallone and Irwin Winkler, who's one of the producers.
I know that very well. Yes.
Rights. So I don't think anybody is going to be terribly agreeable if anyone does want to do a Rocky book. I have no interest in doing a Rocky book. I've seen the movie. Thank you. But
really? So are you more of a Rambo fan? So would you rather watch First Blood or the first Rocky film?
I'd rather watch First Blood.
Wow,
and not just because I have a book out about it. Rocky is probably the most misrepresented film of that era. You know, to this day, there are still people who think that Rocky won that fight.
I know.
He had to win because he was Rocky. In fact, that's something that John Avildsen, who is a friend of mine who directed the film, and I kept on talking about. People actually have their own kind of wish fulfillment about Rocky because he made such a strong impression. It's an important movie because of what it did for independent filmmaking, because of what it did to the whole structure of writing and directing. But it's not something that captivates my interest right now.
No, that's fair. And I liked what you said in the book about Sly at the time. And you were very good to Sly. And I will say this, I seem to be raking him through the coals a little bit. I'm not. I think he's actually a really fascinating person. But you were very dear and kind about saying that he was mistreated by his fellow peers in the industry because he was such a kind of a go-getter. He was directing his early films and writing his early films. I don't know if you use the word jealous. Celebrity is a very competitive business, right? And so you got this young up-and-comer, good-looking guy. How dare he film his own films of the Rocky and Rambo franchise, write his own stuff? Who does he think he is, making his own? And I look at it as good for him. You know what? If they're not going to make a movie that I can win an audition for, then I'll just make my own movie.
This is part of the conflict. In the book, I talk about why does everybody give Arnold Schwarzenegger a watch?
Yes.
And they come down on Sylvester Stallone. Schwarzenegger's killed more people on screen than in Rambo 3 and 4. And he gets away with it. I don't know. Are Austrians more charming than guys who come from Maryland? I have no idea.
Yeah, I loved that when you read that. And I love Arnold and his movies as well. But you brought up a great reason why you think that is. I'll save it for the readers. Why you think the Arnold kind of gets a pass. This was before the nanny incident, I believe. But he gets a pass where Sly doesn't really kind of get the pass. Sly gets raked over the coals, or his movies are reviewed harder than Arnold. It is interesting. Okay. Oh, we should mention at the time of this writing, of course, you would not know this when you wrote the book, but Ted Kotcheff has since passed since you.
Yeah, since the book came out, he was unavailable for an interview. He had a wonderful memoir, which I was able to quote in some of the commentary tracks on the DVDs, but
okay.
He wasn't available to talk to me, shall we say.
Yeah. Hey, he passed at an older age. Good for you. He lived a full life, 92. That's a full life. So
an incredible filmography, too. When you look at the range of things that he did, Westerns and First Blood and comedies, the man could direct anything.
And a fellow Canadian. I'm a Canadian, by the way. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Rest in peace to Ted. Yeah, he did a great job, and he'll always be remembered, of course, for the Rambo fandom of the great work he did for this. I had not known that the weather was so terrible for the shoot. I'm from British Columbia. I'm in Ottawa right now, and I'm going back to my hometown. I'm in the military, and I'm going back to Victoria this summer. That's where I was born and raised, Victoria, British Columbia. So Hope was very familiar to me, and Vancouver, of course, and all this. But I'm just surprised about the terrible weather they had. It must have just been bad luck and time. I know the weather can be cold and stuff, but it almost doubled the budget because of the weather delays.
The weather delays. And also, I don't know if anybody ever looked at an almanac, but it's like the latitude where there's less sunlight every day. It's difficult when they were shooting to extend the time. You can't make the sun stop in the sky. You're not Joshua. But they had a lot of challenges where they were shooting. Plus, the deep woods are so hard to shoot in. And the photography is just phenomenal, especially the blocking. It's hard to shoot a movie where you can't really see everything because you have to be skilled as a director and as an editor to make sure the audience can follow the action, know what's happening where. Very hard to do that when you can't see everything. And they managed to do it for First Blood. And, of course, in the other films, too, the jungles and everything. People don't recognize how technically difficult some of these things are to shoot.
Oh, yeah. Now, there is a similarity. Maybe you could speak to this because you're studying films. But why is there a correlation between guerrilla style filming, things not going the way you thought they're going to go, just between weather, script, I don't know how to explain it. Things are just difficult, but then you produce something that's really incredible, i.e. the first Rocky film, guerrilla style filming. They just shot on the street. They just drive the van down Italian alley. And all these things are just like, they just put up the camera and shoot and hope for the best. But as the films and the budgets increase and the stardom increases and the films continue, even though it's a more polished product, the films aren't as quote unquote as objectively as good as the first films, both in the Rocky and Rambo franchise, both as Sly stardom increases. But this happens in a lot of films. Why is that? Why is it when there's chaos behind the camera, so to speak, that the film could be almost a better film?
I'll give you 3 quotes, and I don't know if they're going to really answer your question.
Sure.
One of them is William Friedkin always talked about the filmmaking god, the god who somehow gives you the sunlight just when you need it, and then it goes behind the clouds again. There's that. There's also Samuel Goldwyn, the producer, once talked about the importance of having tension and friction on a film set. He says, pleasant shoots make for pleasant films. Pleasant meaning not particularly interesting. And the third quote, I suppose, is from Orson Welles, who says, a director is a person who presides over accidents. You keep the good stuff in and you toss the bad stuff out. Perhaps guerrilla filmmaking is so evident when you watch it that the audience forgives some of the rough edges. But when you have a couple of $100 million to make a movie, by gubs, they expect everything to be completely in focus and for nothing to have happened. I don't know. It might be a difference in just being lucky that you get the film done on guerrilla films, independence, and staying there until the sun comes up exactly right through the clouds if you have a lot of hundreds of millions of dollars. But it's a miracle when it happens. I've just done a book with Leonard Maltin called Every Movie is a Miracle, which pretty much summarizes how anybody ever gets to make a film done.
Oh, wow. Say hi to Leonard for me. I would love to interview him. I've followed his career my whole life as a film nerd. I'd get his books back in the day before the internet. I'd get his film almanac books. Remember that when you had to go back? You go back and look at the actor's name, and then Sylvester Stallone, he's on page 30, page 78. You remember doing that stuff?
Yeah. Leonard and I have known each other for 50 years and never bothered to sit down and do a book together before.
Oh, wow.
That'll be out in October from Sticking Place Books, and I'm sure we'll be back online talking about it.
So George Cosmatos, he directed the second film. He's an interesting director. Sometimes I feel like Sly works with directors that he can direct. Some actors seem to work with directors that they can maybe do what they want as an actor.
When he had Russell Mulcahy fired from one of the Rambo films, I'm sure that was the case, replacing him with
Peter McDonald.
McDonald, thank you. The bigger the star is, the harder it is to find someone who will direct him, which is why you find really, really talented directors sometimes directing unknowns, because they don't want to have to put up with the BS of someone who comes on and has an entourage with them. I can't speak to the dynamics of how Stallone makes his movies. I do know that when he wants something done, he wants it done his way, and he is the 500-pound gorilla when it comes to filmmaking.
Sure.
But look at what he's done. Cosmatos is an interesting director because he is, for First Blood, maybe his, or Rambo, help me, Rambo 2, okay? Maybe his most distinguished and most successful film. But he was one of the most successful filmmakers of all time. I'm damned if you can name any of his other movies.
Oh, I can tell you right now, and you're going to shoot yourself, Nat.
Well,
Tombstone.
Yeah,
Okay.
Which was a disaster.
What?
Yeah.
What do you mean, a disaster of a product or a disaster of a shoot?
Him. Apparently everybody directed that but him, if you believe the legends.
Yeah, that's right. My understanding is Kurt Russell took over direction on that film.
And he also did the Cassandra Crossing, I think.
Oh, I don't know that one. Yeah.
I lived my life in that movie theater.
Okay.
Look, sometimes the elements come together. And when you have someone like Stallone and certainly David Morrell and Richard Crenna on the second film, they know what they're doing. And they can guide a new director, the new kid, toward making it play off.
And I really loved your insight on Crenna. I've learned so much about Richard Crenna in your book. Again, we'll save it for the readers, but he just seemed like such a sweetheart of a guy.
David Morrell said that too. They did some press interviews together and just bonded like you wouldn't believe. It's wonderful. Crenna was in everything for years. Never gave a bad performance, but he never became a bankable star. He was just one of these guys you loved seeing when he stepped on the screen. And that's really what a journeyman actor does.
Yeah, journeyman actor. That's right. I know. I've said this before in my podcasting days, where if I was ever an actor, or I wouldn't necessarily want to be a celebrity, but I would sure love to be, hey, that guy. Oh, he's in that film, because you could still move around, go to Disneyland with your family. You might have a couple of people say, hey, I really enjoyed you when you had that character arc on CSI or whatever. You're always working without being mobbed, so to speak.
That's right. The character actors are the ones who make the audience love a film. And yet the pressure of the film's success is not upon their shoulders because they're not the leads. I was on a shoot, and I was in a bus with all of the character actors, who included Slim Pickens, Jack Elam, Herb Vigran, Denver Pyle, and maybe one or two others. Everybody you've ever seen in your life in a Western, okay? And we're sitting on the bus waiting for the rain to clear so we can continue the shoot. And all of a sudden, Jack Elam, the guy with the eye that goes like that?
Yeah.
Pulls out a wad of $1 bills and said, anybody want to play liar's poker? And I just want to let you know, if anybody like Jack Elam pulls out a wad of bills to play liar's poker, you're going to go home broke. I won't explain what it is. Google it.
Okay.
But these guys had the greatest stories to tell. And being practiced actors, they knew everybody and they told these great stories. Always sit, if ever possible, with the character actors.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Now, back to Russell's firing on Rambo 3. Are you able to say what Stallone and him fought over in general?
He was shooting things that weren't in the script. And those things that were in the script, he wasn't shooting them the way Stallone wanted. That's what we know. There may have been some dynamic problems as well. It's an immense amount of pressure that was on Stallone's shoulders. And I'm sure he wanted to make sure everything was done the way that he knew, because he knew the DNA of the character. Beyond that, it's only speculation.
Sure. Now, Stallone, he seems to injure himself on almost every one of these films, which is a credit to just how much he puts both his body and his character into the Rambo character. He bruised his ribs again with the horseback riding. And I like that he did the horseback riding, because for us Rambo nerds, you might not be tracking this now, but for us Rambo nerds, we like that he did the horse riding in Rambo 3 because his character was from a ranch in Arizona.
Yeah, so was he. He was raised on a horse farm in suburban Maryland, and his family had raised horses. He was an expert horseman.
Yeah, that's why he played polo with his brother Frank, I believe, and stuff like that.
Yeah. David Morrell talks about the scene where he's carrying a torch and riding on the horse, and I guess this is Rambo 3. And the wind was such, and the speed of the horse was such, that the flames were blowing back on him. And after the take was over, David looked, and Stallone burned himself with the fire. He had second to third degree burns on parts of his body, but he didn't call cut. He did the shot, and that's in the movie.
Yeah, and that's what I love about Sly. He wouldn't get the stunt doubles if he didn't have to. Which now back to Rambo, that's the second Rambo film.
Yeah,
when that cliff jump, I mean, as a kid. As a younger viewer, I always believed it was Sly who did the cliff jump, but I think it's a stuntman, correct? That does that cliff jump with the fire at his feet. I always thought it was Sly that got pushed with the fireball. Is that an urban legend, or?
I don't know.
So the stuntman's near fatal fall was during the waterfall jump scene that halted production.
Oh, that was okay. This is the pyrotechnics guy was checking to see whether everything had been exploded in the waterfall, and they hadn't been.
See, I always thought that was Sly that got pushed off the waterfall. It burnt his feet, but I guess I should assume it would be a stunt double doing that dive, because it was pretty away shot. Like, it was a far off shot. You know how if it's a stuntman, they don't want to get too close on the actor?
Yeah.
Because,
These are the days before face replacement.
Of course, sure.
Face replacement, yeah.
I'd forgotten about this for the fourth Rambo film, that they did use real Karen rebels as extras.
Yeah. There, why not hire them, right?
Sure, yeah, of course. Now, you saw the last Rambo films, right? You did see the fourth and fifth Rambo film?
I saw them when I did the book. I didn't see them when it came out. The fifth one is hard to find in a complete form. The international version, which is a bit of a discussion I've been having on one of the Facebook websites.
Oh, yeah, because he did the flash flood sequence at the beginning of the film, some of the cuts, and some of them he doesn't do it. Now, I got a question that we bring up all the time. This is just opinion, so there's no wrong answer. Should Rambo, the character in the fifth film, should he have kept his long hair, or are you happy with the haircut that the character has?
It had never occurred to me, being somewhat follically challenged myself, whether I should go long hair or short hair. It's arguable whether the fifth film is an actual Rambo movie. So I think he can do whatever he wants.
Okay, now if he had the Rambo hair with the bandana, doesn't it just make it more of a Rambo film? To me, it's like having a Batman film without the costume. How much of it is it a Batman film if there's no costume?
That's it. I don't think it's the costume. I think it's the motivation. He's an avenging angel for a specific person. He's not going into white Mexico out of the drug dealers. He's going in to try to avenge his adoptive daughter. It's more accurate, I think, to call Last Blood a Liam Neeson film that stars Sylvester Stallone.
I know. That's what makes it a little bit disappointing. Now, there was talk about Hunter, the novel, about the extraterrestrial creature. The Stallone has had the rights of that book forever, and that he was dabbling with the idea of making that the fifth Rambo film, that he actually fights an alien creature. For better or for worse, which one would you have rather seen? The one as we see it now, where he takes on the Mexican drug cartel and revenging his adopted daughter or granddaughter's death, or he fights a predator-like creature?
I would not want to see him fight a predator-like creature as Rambo. That would be a cartoon. I think there's enough of a vestige of humanity in the Rambo character, especially tunnels he's dug and the motivations he has to make it emotionally a Rambo film. I think the other problems with it are pyrotechnics. But Rambo's a victim, even though he tries not to be a victim. Even in the last film, when the daughter says, "Does it still get to you? Can you still control yourself?" And he says something like, "I've got to watch myself. I've got to control myself every day." He's still a person who's haunted by the experiences he had in Vietnam. He's still a very, very damaged veteran who's been attacked by his own country, really. And he's someone who's trying to escape from this yoke. And I don't think that going with an outer space creature is going to help the meaning of the film. It certainly won't help the film's fans who have been faithful.
You're absolutely right, and I'm glad he did. However, that book Hunter, he's had that rights. I swear for at least 25 years. I bought that book so long ago on paperback because I'm such a Sly fan that I had heard through like Entertainment Weekly or what. This is pre-internet, I swear, where like Sly bought the rights to the book and he was going to do this, and I think it was almost in response to the Predator film that Arnold had done, and.
Yeah,
as the Sly's wanted to do, and that's fine. I love their competition because it makes both their films better, I think. So, anyways, and I read the book back when he bought the rights, and I've been waiting forever. It's too late now, but I'm just glad he didn't do it for the Rambo film. I saw your bibliography here, and I see that you have a book coming out called "Breaking the Code." Now, excuse my apologies with the name here. Otto Preminger?
Yeah, it came out last year. It's called Breaking the Code, Otto Preminger.
Oh, I thought it's coming out this year. My apologies. No. Oh, it's already out. My dates are wrong.
Out. It's out. It's from Applause Books. It's a bit esoteric. Otto Preminger made several films during the 1950s and 60s, which challenged the censor production code in America, the Motion Picture Association. Before it became the letter rating system we know now, they would actually go over every script and tell you what you could and couldn't shoot. And Otto Preminger pushed that to the very limits and helped end movie censorship in America. Oh. And the second half is a play called Code Blue that I wrote with a good friend of mine named Arnie Reisman, dramatizing the drama of what went on behind the scenes between Otto Preminger and Joseph Breen, who was the head of the production code, when Preminger decided to make a film called The Moon is Blue, which was a sex comedy without any sex, but with words that the production code didn't allow. It's a fun read, especially if you think Otto Preminger was a bit of a scallywag, shall we say.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to have to fire my people for giving me the wrong dates on that. I don't know why.
You're Canadian. You never fire anybody.
That's true. I'll probably have to give them a raise.
Okay.
Another book that sounds interesting here, and I know this was already out, is The Naughty Bits, What the Censors, back to Censors.
Yeah,
what the Censors.
That's more censor stuff, yeah. Let's see if I happen to have a copy handy. This is a lot of fun. This takes up 53 or 54 classic movies and what the producers had to go through to be able to get them on the screen. Everything from The Sound of Music, which didn't require censorship, to Convention City, which all copies have been destroyed by the studio because it was considered so vulgar. It's a fun read, and the chapters are short, so you can read them in the bathroom.
Sure, yeah. Okay, what was taken out of The Sound of Music?
Nothing, but I had to put something in there in case the censors came at the door.
Oh, okay.
There was stuff taken out of, by the way, of the Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille's biblical film of 1956.
What was taken out of that?
Interestingly, there's a scene at the very beginning where Pharaoh's armies are killing the firstborn of all the Hebrew slaves. Yeah. And there's a shot, which is still in the film, which shows a mother on the side of the frame crying, howling, because her infant has just been killed. And one of Pharaoh's men come out from behind a curtain with his bloody sword, wiping the blood off.
Oh, wow.
Even now, my heart seizes because it's what you don't see that makes it so powerful. And DeMille knew that. And the production code office said, you better tone it down.
Yeah, I'm glad Rambo did that for us in the fourth Rambo film when he showed us children being chucked in the fire. So Rambo took care of that for us.
Yeah, it's a very brutal film.
That's a brutal film. That's a hard one to watch. And that's the only kind of criticism I have with the fourth film is, and I know that some cinemas actually banned the film because of its violence. And I understand Stallone defended that, saying, look, this is what's going on here. This is the atrocities. And I get it. I'm not trying to be glib here, but this is his Schindler's List for the Rambo character, meaning you wouldn't tell Steven Spielberg, hey, don't show that. Don't show the concentration camps. Don't show how brutal it was for those who were being killed and brutalized. That's what happened. I'm showing you how, like, I'm uncovering what. So Sly, in his Rambo way, is showing, hey, these atrocities are still happening in the world in a place called Miramar. So these things are happening still.
This is true. And that's the same reason he went to Afghanistan for the third Rambo film. Because, of course, the Taliban were our friends then. They weren't flying planes into our building yet. But he believed that these people were being downtrodden by their Russian overlords, which they were. And he made the film for that reason, to support in fact, it's even dedicated in one way or another to the fighters of Afghanistan. And of course, the film about Burma is still under a booted foot of oppression.
Yeah, that's terrible. We always make the joke that Rocky ended the Cold War with Rocky 4, but then he facilitated 9/11 because of Rambo 3. So he broke even.
But he also helped liberate Poland. Again, this is all in the book. You see, his image of the rebel has inspired quite a number of rebellions toward democracy.
Oh yeah, that was at the beginning of the book. That's right. That's right. That was such an interesting part. That was near the beginning with the First Blood. How much the Rambo character, the movies, inspired those troops and people. That's amazing. One last thing we talk before we close about your friend David. Of course, David Morrell, the creator of the Rambo character from his brain. You just have to read the book. But it goes in great detail about how the character was created, what David had to go through to get the character on screen, all the different iterations of what the films could have been. It's really fascinating, all the different versions that could have been, which I didn't even know half of these. But what I loved is how David said, how did he say it? It's like when you have a child, and I'm a father, but when you have a child, you can only do so much with your kid, and at some point you have to let your child go into the world, and it just becomes what it becomes. So yeah, that's my son. And that's what David said with Rambo. Rambo became this character on the page to now Lunchbox, cartoons. It's beyond what he ever probably imagined that this character would become.
It's true. There are really 3 literary characters who've become icons: Sherlock Holmes, James Bond, and Rambo. Think about that. Of all the books ever written, those are the 3 that everybody around the world knows.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's amazing. I want people to get your book. Get the Ramble Report.
Shameless plug. Get the book. If the book doesn't sell, I don't get paid. I'm pleased to be able to write it. I'm insanely pleased to be able to work with David Morrell. I'm very happy with the reception the book has received so far. And it's a book for the fans. It doesn't shy away from some of the more serious issues, but I believe it compensates for them with some analysis and a lot of stuff that even David said he didn't know about the movies. So I'm proud to have done this. I'm expecting a call from Sylvester Stallone any day, and I hope you'll be happy.
Honestly, you deserve it. And this is not a slight on Sly. You deserve it. I'm disappointed that his people didn't feel like he had the time for you, because what you uncovered and what you presented in this book is really amazing. It's a very, I'd say, easy read. I don't mean that as an insult, but it just flows it flows so nicely. I'm able to follow every storyline, and you intermix interviews. It's all the chronological order with all the films, behind the scenes stuff. It's really the ultimate Rambo book, honestly, Nat. I think you nailed this, and this is coming from a Rambo fan. That's why I selfishly asked. I admit I selfishly asked if you're going to do a Rocky book just because I'm selfish, but that's fine. You don't have to do it for me, but because what you did here for the Rambo character and for the Rambo franchise, and the title says it's 5 movies, 3 books, 1 legend. And I truly enjoy these films in general, of course, and they all have things that I love for different reasons. Of course, the first film is what it is, but I just enjoy the franchise as a whole and the character arc as a whole. And your book just brings to light things. I don't want to say too much about the book, because the joy is finding out the things that I hinted at here. I wanted to tease the audience some of the things that they would uncover, because there's things that I had no idea. And you source everything, of course. You're a journalist to a T. Now, what is next, though?
In October, I have the paperback edition of The Exorcist Legacy coming out with a new chapter about Exorcist Believer, the movie that was released last year. Also coming out is a book from Pegasus Books called Bogart and Houston, Their Lives, Their Adventures, and the Classic Films They Made Together. Humphrey Bogart and John Huston, Maltese Falcon, African Queen, Treasure Sierra Madre. It's a real fun book about these 2 very different, very creative men. And then I just sold another book, which I'm waiting for the contracts on now, so I won't talk about it. And a few other things. I'm a writer. That's what I'm supposed to do. And I'm working at it.
How many quotes do you have memorized?
Quotes? You mean in terms of...
during this interview, you're like Orson Welles said this. And how many of those do you have ready to pop out at any?
I'm a very good after-dinner speaker. And importantly, I cite everything. I always give credit to the right quotes. But this is what you do. You're supposed to be entertaining. If I wasn't entertaining, we'd have a test pattern instead of an interview.
Oh, is that the key? That's probably been the problem for my show. Being entertaining, I got to work on that. Nat, it's been a pleasure. I would like to thank Craig, of course, who interviewed you for his De Palma podcast. Yes. Craig and he's like my David Morrell, and says we've worked together on podcasts, and he's an online friend that I have yet to meet in real life, though.
He's a good guy. In fact, I just heard from him before signing on to see you. So,
good. He gave you fair warning. He said, be nice to Ryan. He's not a bad guy. Don't let him scare you. Craig's a great guy. He's fantastic. And he loves Brian De Palma. And the same way I kind of love Sly in his movies. And this has been a real treat. And your book was a true treat to read. And I can't stress this enough to any Rambo fan listener to this podcast on YouTube and on the audio versions. Buy the book. Where would you want people to link to buy the book?
Amazon is good. It's supposed to be in bookstores. So if anybody still has a brick and mortar bookstore anywhere, it's probably right on the shelf. It's unusual these days, but it is. Kensington is the publisher, and they're very aggressive about getting it in front of actual human eyes.
Okay, take a look at your bookstores, folks. If not, go to Amazon. The Ramble Report, it'll come up right away. It's there, and it's the classic picture of Rambo putting the bandana on his head. So you can't miss it. It's the only one that looks like that. Nat, thank you so much for coming on. It was a true pleasure having you on and spending time with me and letting me geek out a little bit about films and Rambo and picking your brain a little bit. It was a treat.
A pleasure here too, Ryan. Thank you.